This next part is very surprising. It's very surprising and very strange. What happens is like this. The Mishnah in Shvi, there's a thing called the Betulat Shikma. Betulat Shikma, why is it called the Betulat Shikma? Because the first time you cut this tree, Betulat Shikma was their oak, is probably the wood that's used as like the strong, hard, useful wood, right? Oak, is that correct? Right. So it's their, oak. Or I'm not sure what tree Shikma is. No, it's not oak, but I'm saying that's what they used. Nowadays they don't know. Nowadays that's not what's used for. But in their days in Israel, that was the.
I thought Shikma was Rabbi Levi.
Okay. What?
Isn't Shikma Rabbi Levi?
Yes, correct. Oh, now I know you've become Israeli. Shkoyach. Right. What? Shivuka Shikma. Right? Shivuka Shikma. So, whole thing, we know that word from somewhere. Sycamore. All right. Yeah. All right. Sycamore. Okay. Manyan. So here's an interesting attribute of the sycamore. It grows the first time not very wide, and then you cut it down to size and grows much wider and bigger and stronger. And that's why there's a halach in Choshen Mishpat that if you sell a betulat shikma, if you sell a shikma, you have to say if it's a betula or not. Betula as in was it cut once or not. That's what's called betulat shikma, because it's a significant difference between the first time and the first time it's cut and later on. Yes, that's why it's called the betulat shikma. That's where there's a better word than that. But I'll remember later. I'm saying more specific. What's important is that the Mishnah says you're not allowed to cut a betulat shikma during Shmita, even though why are you cutting the betulat shikma? For the wood. You cut it for the wood, but the outcome is that it will cause the tree to grow significantly stronger and bigger. Okay? So you're not allowed to cut the betulat shikma during Shmita because you are cutting it for the wood, but it's called pruning. It's like zmila, right? You're making the tree grow bigger and stronger. Meaning the normal way is to do it 3 tfachim above the ground. So what you do is you do it a full meter above the ground, which wouldn't help it grow as well, or mamash at the on-ground level, which would also make it very hard for the tree to get back to itself and grow again. So Rabbi Yehuda says that's a solution. So the only thing you have to do is to cut it properly. So the Gemara Batra explains this. Amar Abaye, 3 tfachim me'alela, right? 3 tfachim is the best. Me'im haaretz, you do it right flat on the land, right? You cut. V'dai kashila. That's definitely not good for the tree. It'll take the tree a very long time to get back to itself. Mikan ve'ilach lo makshe kashila v'la v'lo ma'alela. Right? If it's just above the land, so the tree will just grow again as it was. Right? The right thing to do during Shmita is to cut it in a way that will make it hard for it to grow properly again. So it's not destroying the tree, but it will. But it'll make it sets the tree back. It doesn't kill the tree; it does set the tree back significantly. Because if you just cut 30 centimeters higher, so the tree will grow stronger and better. If you cut it from the ground on ground level, so it'll take it years before it grows again to what it was. So, says Tosfot. What? No, if you need wood. All these cases you need wood. The interesting thing is, why are you doing all this? For the wood, right? You're doing it for the wood. So l'chora, all this has nothing to do with our sugya yet, right? Because here the question is a totally different question of what happens if you're cutting a tree for the wood, right? There's nothing to do. We're talking about, again, our sugya right now. Right, exactly. I'm not cutting it for pruning, and I say, well, it's prune like this, prune like that. I'm cutting it right. I'm cutting because I want to build a staircase. I need very strong wood to build a staircase. Right? Oh, okay. There you go.
The other thing is the bait bag. There's the bait bag. There's what's called the bait bag. When you do what's the bag?
The bud is the stick.
Is the log.
Right.
It's a long log. It's a big
Yeah, fair. Very good. Okay. I wasn't aware of that. As you say, it's long and it's long and straight, I imagine.
No.
Right. Okay. Very good. Shkoyach. Okay, there you go. So I need it for my bait bud, so I want to cut a tree. This has nothing to do with our sugya, right? Because I'm not doing it for agricultural purposes. I'm doing it for the wood, not for the tree. Exactly. Says Tosfot, and this is now Tosfot drops the bomb on us. Says Tosfot, top of page 9. Lo nikshikashi la velo aluye ma'alela lav davka. Okay, gabe shvita ma yasur. If it doesn't help the tree, why should it be asur? Ha amar ba'avodah zara ukme il nashar yavru il nasur. Tosfot say you don't need to do when you say lo mikshikashi lo alui ma'ala, right? They don't mean that it actually doesn't help the tree at all. Because if it doesn't help the tree at all, it's mutar. Why is it mutar? Because it's not avruye. Avruye. So you see what Tosfot did there? Tosfot say, what's it in ukmen avruye? Only avruye is asur. Anything that's not avruye is mutar. Now here we're not talking about hafsid. We're not talking about loss. There's no financial loss. Right? In other words, it's not that the tree will be harmed if I don't cut it. I just want the wood. Tosfot say, well, anything you do that's not in the category of avruye is mutar and shmita. Just that's what the Gemara says. Ukme nashar avruye nasul. Now you're going to ask, is this not zomel? Is this not zomel? We're going to get to that later on. I'm going to get back to that. Is this not zomel doraita? We're going to get to that in unit 6. We'll have to define zomel better. But what's interesting about Tosfot, why should this be true? Why should it be true that anything that's not avruye is allowed? Why? Shema.
The basis of the whole thing.
Right, meaning it's not a right. The Ritva Rashi, right? The basis of what of the whole idea of Shmita is doing work on the land that enhances the land. If it doesn't enhance the growth, doesn't enhance the land, it's not a melacha, as Rashi said, not an avodah karka, as the Ritva said. So you see, Tosfot very much continues that path, and it says not just as an idea, not only conceptually, as the Ritva and Rashi said, but also halacha l'maaseh. Right, halacha l'maaseh, he says anything that's not avruya is mutar.
I need to for my fire.
Right, correct. So you might ask, so if I'm doing something,
If I can do it 2 ways. I can just cut down the cost of tree without thinking of pruning.
right.
Or I can say I can prune it there. At the same time, I'm doing it for my fire.
Oh, so now you're asking a very important question of what happens if, let's call it the psik reisha case, right? In other words, I want to cut my tree, but there's a psik reisha that is also pruning, right?
I think it's to cut it right.
Why? It's not a, what do you mean? If you cut it the right way.
Ah,
okay, right. Right. Tosfot seemed to say the psik, right. So Tosfot seems to say, correct. The Tosfot seemed to say that psik reisha is also, right? I'm cutting it only for the wood, but if I do it the way that will enhance the tree, it'll be usher, even though I'm cutting it only for the wood, right? Right? Beseder, we're going to get back to that in unit 6. We're going to go to the psik reisha question. And we'll see Tosfot is consistent. Tosfot also in the case of psik reisha said it's usher, even though in the Gemara, it very much sounds like psik reisha is mutar. Tosfot say the Gemara can't mean that. So Tosfot is consistent. Remember this Tosfot when we get to there. Right? Have a little quick look at Mikdash David brings this Tosfot as an nafkamina bemet. האתם גבי בתולת שקמה אם לא יקצוץ כלל להיקבצד באילן, רק שקוצץ אמרים דלא יקוץ פחות משלושה טפחים, משום דלא קשי לה ולא מעלילה, אם כן מה זה עניין להגיד אוקמאילן השארי, has nothing to do with אוקמאילנה. That's not the sugya, you're in the wrong sugya. מורה דסביר לילתוספות דזה דאוקמאילן השארי, אין זה משום פסד התירו, אלא רק כל שהמלאכה אינה מועלת בפועל, אינה מלאכה לעין שביעית. So basically what we said. So there's just an interesting point. Rav Rimon wanted to connect this to the question of putting pesticide in a place where there isn't anything yet. Prevention, yeah. Pesticide, not regular pesticide. It causes it has a different name, right? It'll cause the weeds not to grow.
Oh, it was another pesticide.
Yes, this is different. I got mixed up. Well, what?
For weeds grow.
Right.
For the 8th year? Even for the 7th year. When you do this,
So that because I don't want the trees that are there now to be harmed, the plants that are here now to be harmed by weeds. So the different word, you got mixed up. What? So it's not really a killer because the weeds aren't there yet. But yeah, that's the idea. Weeds, something. Yeah. So
when you're doing that,
why?
you're doing on Shmita or you're doing before Shmita?
During Shmita. So he wants to say it's allowed during
If you're
Shmita.
going to do it before Shmita,
He wants to say it's
only
during.
going to have an effect on Shmita.
Right. I'm doing it on Shmita and it'll have an effect on Shmita.
No, I'm saying if you before Shmita, then an effect on Shmita.
Again, that'd be the Chazon Ish, right? But we want to say fundamentally. No, that's definitely okay. No, that's definitely okay.
It will only have an effect in a month's time.
Yeah, are you allowed to do it now for later on this year? That's the question. And so Rav Rimon says, well, there's no current of said, but it's also you can't recognize it as Melchet Karka either, because you're not really doing anything, right? Nothing happened yet. Right. Now, another aspect of this has to do with the question of Zmira. And here you can medek from Tosfot the other way around. If I say that the whole issue is an issue of banan, it can only apply to melachot that are Drabanan, right? Okay. Now, Baruch Hashem, there aren't many melachot that are Doraita. So thank you, Hashem. Melachot that are Doraita, right? The only nafkamina would be Zmira, right? Pruning would be the only nafkamina. Can I say, am I allowed to prune in such a way? Am I allowed to prune in the case where if I don't prune, there will be significant harm to the tree? Right? No, pruning is I'm saying there's can I say there's pruning leukme and pruning leavruya? Right? Could I make such a distinction? Right? If I say the whole issue, the whole heter of avruya of ukme is only because draban komseder gazura banan, so I can't apply that because it's not xera. Can't apply that to pruning, right? Because pruning is doraita. If I say that by definition, the melachot when Hashem said planting and pruning, he meant doing things that will enhance the tree's growth. That won't apply. So here I'm not doing something that will enhance the tree's growth. I'm only saving it from detriment. What? Lat. So the Mikdash David asks. So let's have a look at Rav Kook. Rav Kook in Shabbat Haaretz on page 9. מה שאסור לקטום את הנטיות, אם תעשה פעולה זו כדרך הזמירה ללא שינוי, יש לאסור אפילו אם היא לצורך העמדת האילן למצבו. שלא מצינו יותר לעוק מאילנה כי אם בתולדות שנאסורות רק מדרבנן, אבל עצם הזמירה שאסורה מן התורה, יש לומר שאפילו לעוק מאילנה אסור still. Why? Because he says it's all a heter for drabanan things. It's not that by definition anything isn't enhancing the growth is also. It is mutar, sorry. It's been compensated because drabanan. So I have something that's drabanan. Case of Hef said there's no gzera. That's all. But if it's a melcha doraita, doesn't matter. Doesn't help me. But again, based on what we saw in Rashi and the Ritva, we should have said, really, that if you did it, that it's not the melacha that the Torah is talking about, right? The melacha the Torah is talking about is enhancing something, right? See, Rav Tikuchinsky disagrees. Harav Kook lamad shemelachot doraita kmo zimur asur af leukmei kmo zimur, not many others, right? לענד, רבנו חננאל מפורש כתב שמותר אף בזימור דאורייתא ולשונו שם גיזום, שהוא חיתוך הזמורות להחליף אחרים לעברות האילן ובאסור. So he wants to medayek that the Gemara itself implies that different kinds of pruning. We're going to have to go into the question of pruning next time because the Gemara has about 6 different words for cutting branches. So one of them is pruning, and that's doraita. The others are not. And what are they? Tough, good question. So Rabbeinu Chanel there says, the gizum, what gizum is mutar? Right, the Gemara has gizum kakashya, right? It is the gizum that's lavruya, the gizum that's leukme, to keep the tree alive, the gizum is mutar. What is gizum? So Rashi says gizum is cutting it differently. We'll see Rashi later on. Gizum, the cutting itself is done differently from zmira. So it's a different melacha, even though to us, people who know more about cutting people than know about cutting trees, right? Most of the people are on this table. Why? No surgeons, all right. Right. Because if to us, well, what do we know? Well, we're to cut the branch in a way that will enhance the growth, or we're to cut the branch to save it from harm. Well, we don't understand these things. But Rabbeinu Chanel says it could be you'll cut in the same place, in the same way. But the question is, what's your goal? Are you doing it leukmei or lavruye? And that can also apply.
What's the goal? Why are you doing it?
Yes.
Not for the tree.
Correct. If it's safe. Yes. Rashi, we're going to see, Rashi says, no, the pruning is a very, very specific place. You cut the tree, you cut the branch in a very, very specific way. You cut any way that's not quite like that, that's not pruning, the effect will be different. When? Right. Now, right, correct. Rabbeinu Chanel is like Rashi and the Ritva in that sense, correct. Now, here's an interesting point. The Gemara, we learned in unit number 2 that you're allowed the halacha of Eser Netiyot. Before Shmita, if you have a land that has enough trees in it, you're allowed to do what? To plow. To plow. Why are you allowed to plow? To make the water, to enhance the irrigation, right? You have saplings, you have netiyot. It's saplings, it's not proper trees. They're still growing, they're still getting accustomed to things. Big trees can usually cope with water on their own. They won't die just by watering, just by rainwater alone. Most trees won't die without that for a year, without being watered. As opposed to saplings, young trees need more watering. So to enhance the irrigation, if you have a field that has 10 netiyot in it, you're allowed to plow until when? During Tosefet Shvi'it. During Tosefet Shvi'it, you're allowed to plow. What about during Shmita? Are you allowed to plow during Shmita? In order to make sure these saplings don't die. Right? It sounds very much like, look, I have a field where I have saplings, right? And they're going to die if I don't create good irrigation. So am I allowed to plow, which is Asr Midoraita? So we say we're not allowed, right? Only until Rosh Hashanah, only but Tosefet Shvi'it. So during Shmita, you're not allowed to do Melacha D'Oraita, even if the trees will die. That's Shlomo Zalman's raya. So it's a nice raya. Right, exactly, which proves Charisha. So you're asking another question. Is Charisha D'Oraita? We're going to have to go back into that into unit 6. But the Pashtut is that Charisha is in Melacha D'Oraita. Why do we know Charisha is Melacha D'Oraita? Because of the halacha of Eser Netiyot. I have halacha Hashem Hashem Sinai that tells me that you're only allowed to plow into Tosefet Shvi'it if you have saplings. Right. So the halacha Hashem Sinai tells me that you're also not allowed to plow during Shmita. It's going a bit like this, in fact. But we'll have to get, very much so.
gonna prevent.
I agree. We're gonna have to go back then into Unit 6. Now, in Unit 6, we're gonna go deeply into this specifically, but I just want to focus here on the Drabanan aspect. So it says Reb Shlomo Zalman, we see from here that plowing, in order to save the saplings from death, is asur. Right? There's only a special, therefore, you can't say ukme about things that are doraita. So ukme must be a drabanan thing. That minkom seder lo gazura banan. It's not a fundamental point within the. Because plowing that's done for the irrigation system that would otherwise be detrimental is asur. This shows, right? This shows that the Torah asured also things that without which would be detrimental to the trees. Now, then at the end he says, let's have a look at the tshuva itself. He says over here, נראה דעבודות דאורייתא אסירי, שהרי היתר חרישה בעשר נטיות מבואר בירושלמי דהו כדי שלא יתייבשו. Why are you allowed to plow for the 10 nitiyot for irrigation? Otherwise, the trees will die. הריטב"א כתב כדי שלא ימותו. More specific, more explicit. אפילו הכי בשביעית עצמה אסור. משום דרק חריש לצורך שביעית הוא דאסור. לא לאוקמה שהוא לשמור על מה שיש, שלא יתקלקל. לכן רק בתוספת שערי ולא בשביעית עצמה. He ends up saying, מסתבר שגם הבית סובר שגם תולדות אסירים מדאורייתא, גם כן סובר הכלל עד לאוקמה שער. So here he wants to flip the whole thing over and say, what? Yes. Right. The point. I thought he was making the point about plowing bananas. Sorry, I just had a for a moment. Let's remember the Gemara Moed Katana asked, "Why are you allowed to water during Shmita?" Right? So Rava says, watering is drabanan. It's not a real malacha. It's not a right. Fine, good. Watering. You're allowed to do watering leukme, right? Great. Why? Because without watering, everything's in the done. Fine. Now, does Abai agree? Abai answers differently, right? Abai says Shmita nowadays is drabanan, right? Why are you allowed to water the plants? Because Shmita nowadays is drabanan. Rebbe, right? Back to that. Sorry, keep on going back to that. So Shlomo Zalman waits. So according to Abai, what happens when Shmita is doraita? Why? So you wouldn't be allowed to water at all? Because he thinks watering is doraita, right? Because Rava says that watering is drabanan, but Abai is assuming that watering is doraita. If Abai agrees that watering is drabanan, so let's do the math. If Abai agrees that watering is drabanan, why does he have to say Shmita nowadays is drabanan? Just say watering is drabanan. It must mean that Abai assumes that watering is doraita. Now, question: does Abai think you're really not allowed to water at all during Shmita? It must be that Abai agrees that watering leukme must be mutar. The whole chiddush of the Mishnah is that watering you could add more irrigation during Shmita. And the question is why, and the answer is because that's not really part of the Melachot Drabanan. But it must be the most basic, the most minimal. We're going to get back to this. We're going to get back to this point later on of how much watering is allowed. Right? Is watering beyond ukme allowed? We'll see Chazon Ish who says that. But the Reb Shlomo Zalman says it can't be that Abai says that watering is asur midoraita u'mimela you're not allowed to water during Shmita at all. Because otherwise, when Shmita is doraita, everything's going to die. Now, I asked you this question last time, and you said, one of you said, well, when Shmita is doraita, so then we have a bracha, Hashem promised. So I don't need to do anything. Shmita is doraita, Hashem promised. Shmita is drabanan, we're imposing this upon ourselves. So, we might have to, these isurim, we decided to accept upon ourselves. Hashem promised a bracha? Not necessarily. Right? So it could be that Abai would say, when Shmita is doraita, so you're not allowed to water during Shmita either. No, don't worry, we hold like Rava. See, you're all nervous, but not to water either. But so how will the world live? How will the plants live? They live. Hashem will take care of it, right?